Scout, and another issue where Riot is up to their old shenanigans of breaking their own rules. But will anybody talk about it? No, because they can't, because everybody else is paid by Riot. So let's go. What are your thoughts on Yagao suddenly replacing Scout, even though it is explicitly against the rule book for Worlds that Riot has released?
Right. The obvious problem here is basically that you've actually got a very similar scenario to what happened with Danny and Cowrie back in EG in summer of 2022, where if you remember, the system went that you had to have declared your subs already before playoffs of like LCS. They didn't, and I think they did this on purpose to actually get the fake sub aspect. They didn't declare Cowrie because I think they wanted to make Danny like, bro, we don't have a sub. You got to play. Now come into this room with just me, the CEO. What's that? You've come out. Double plus good. I want to play now, and I've totally not been coerced. Oh, excellent, cool. He's consenting to this, guys. Now sign in blood. Like anyway, so he signed and played. And famously, once he broke down after they qualified to Worlds, if you remember, EG went, "We need an emergency sub." And it's like, that's weird. You've already got 3 subs. 2 of them are junglers. Just put a sub
coaches.
In. No, but the thing is, though, he's a jungler, though, isn't he? So like, I need an ADC. So then Riot was like, well, I don't know. Why don't you fuck around and just take that guy out of your academy team? Even though that's a total violation of all of our emergency sub rules. So at the time, I think just because of the mental health spectre looming over that topic, I think it was just taken for granted by people like Team Liquid and Cloud9 and the other squads out there. Like, look, it's just a bad look for us if we complain because this might be like a mental health crisis, not just, you know, them entering a better player. So similar things happened. In the LPL, LNG, who was like, I would have said like maybe like the 4th team for most of the split, pretty good team all in all. The one that Scout obviously double MVP last year plays for. In the end, went through the regional and actually immediately qualified. They actually clapped Weibo, who'd been in the final of the LPL 3-0 and qualified to Worlds. So you think to yourself, brilliant, right? Light's back on form. Gala, he's fucking rolling again. Scout's back in his game. They've figured out what they're going to do jungle-wise. Like everything's going well. Let's get into this. Let's get into LNG at Worlds. By the way, I actually think if they'd have taken their real lineup, they'd probably be similar, like 4th or 5th most likely team to win Worlds. It'd be actually like, they'd be a dark horse to win the whole thing. And spoiler, Scout has won Worlds before. He actually was like a world champion and he was the MVP twice last year of the LPL. So you'd want that lineup to go. Now it turns out, for whatever reason, like, we'd actually talked about this in the past, and we talked about the fact that Scout couldn't come back to LCK. There apparently, the whole time since he left EDG, there was some weird looming contract dispute, a bit like you've heard this thing now, that it was always the case, apparently, that Milky Way was going to get called back to RNG as opposed to FPX. EDG was just waiting to, like, invoke this thing where they claim he basically shouldn't have been able to join LNG or something weird. But because they couldn't block him playing in the LPL, they have figured out, well, we can stop you playing at Worlds, though. And so the issue is, basically, it seems like Scout's just not going to be able to get out of it. So then the point became, right, well, who do they use as a mid laner? Now, again, to refer back to the Danny situation, problem solved, Monty. Whoever you've got in your org that you registered as a sub, you can use him. Now, if you don't have a mid laner, you shout a look, aren't you? You know what? I think when your mid laner isn't eligible to play at Worlds, you should, are you ready? Really bold take here, have probably a worse mid laner. This is mental, though, because one, they already were going to now just let them take another mid laner from LPL. By the way, not even someone contracted to LNG or even plays in LNG in any context. So the maddest one of all is, actually, because initially it was just like maybe they can take anyone who didn't qualify, a lot of people like me and Nynera just thought, right, this is our cunt angle to just crowbar Rookie in there. Put Rookie in there, bro. Give him a fucking other shot. Put me in the game, coach, because obviously the dream is, imagine him actually going, fucking around as a dark horse and then winning Worlds like a different team. Mate, I would be insufferable. But are you ready? This is where, as a Rookie fan, the universe has designed a new cruel and unusual way for Rookie not to qualify to Worlds. You know how we all celebrated when they got that like fluke win in the LPL playoffs and made it further? Well, in doing so, that made them top 6, which has a weird rule, which is because he fluked top 6, he now can't be the player to go in. So I don't even get my own rigged version. Because if people don't know, that's like a classic one from Counter-Strike I always reference, which is in Counter-Strike, when you had ESL Pro League and ECS, famously Na'Vi, because they didn't want to have to qualify, didn't play in ECS, Monty. So there were real years, this happened with Mouse Sports, where teams in ECS who needed a ringer used to use Simple, the best player in the world, and I'm not joking, he would drop like a 50 bomb on like the best teams in the world, play way better than the player you should have had who would have been present, and essentially your sub was like a super sub. So even though in this case it's not quite that bad, it would have been worse if it was Rookie. Apparently now they're going to use Yagao from JDG. Now, I will say there's almost a fairness to that because he's having probably one of the worst splits of his career. So that at least, terrible. That's not at least, it's not like you did pop Rookie in their actual world's winner, like I think best of all time player. But I agree with you. The big issue here is actually this issue that why are all the other teams fine with this as the sub? Because I saw a couple of things. I saw people like, yeah, but then LNG qualified. Now they're getting punished. Yeah, you shouldn't sign players in a way that doesn't actually allow them to properly be contracted by you and go to Worlds. That you should be punished for that. That makes sense. Secondly, the idea that you can bring in like not only Yagao is a fucking LPL champion. Like this guy's a champion of the LPL. He's not just like he's not Fisher when he used to play fucking EDG and be shit. Like he's actually like a champ. If I'm the other teams, I already said before, I think they should have done it in LCS with Danny. If I was all those other playoff teams, Team Liquid, who just lost to them, Cloud9, and I can't remember who the other team even was, the third one. 100 Thieves. I would have just gone to Riot and said, we're not even playing the matches if you let this happen. Why the fuck would they get an upgrade and or a player that isn't on their roster? So similarly, if I'm every team, by the way, the most obvious ones should be the teams that are below them. If you're Team Liquid, if you're G2, if you're Fnatic, if you're Mad Lions, if you're FlyQuest, why aren't you on Front Street with a picket sign? Why are they allowed to play with a different player, an LPL champion? Come on then, give me your thoughts.
Well, there's so much here because there's so much precedent that's already been set. And like, this is a clear and complete violation of competitive integrity. And look, I'm the rules asshole, guys. Like, I'm the one who bangs the drum about this all the time. This is what I was saying when they made the substitution for Cowrie for Danny, which is that the rules must be enforced because this is an abusable, it's a possible abuse of the rules and competitive integrity by teams, not only potentially now, as in now when it happened with Danny, but in the future. And guess what, guys? It turned out that it was a fraudulent reason for benching that player because we found out later that it wasn't some random mental health issue that Danny had. It was a mental health issue that was exacerbated and preyed upon by the organization, thereby creating an even grosser breach of competitive integrity.
That means one is if a player's not good enough, just bully him until he has to quit and get a better player.
And they get a better player. And here's the thing, and people will be like, well, Cowrie wasn't better than Danny. He wasn't that meta. You don't understand. Like, Cowrie was a better player on the champions, the AD champions in that meta than Danny was. So it was an actual upgrade to Danny at that point in time. Did he have the same ceiling that Danny did? No. Like, Danny was an overall better player, but at that specific point in time, because of the Lucian meta that was persisting, Cowrie was seen as a better option. And in fact, he did take 100 Thieves to 5 games. And as I understand it, Thorin, the reasoning behind why Riot made this decision was as follows. Well, we sold out, remember, because the finals weekend is 2 days and it's in the stadium, and they sold tickets for the first day, which is the losers bracket final. And it was between 100 Thieves and EG. And the reasoning was, well, we sold tickets for this day. We can't disappoint the fans with a substitute like jungler or coach in an AD carry position. So we have to allow this to happen. So they break their own rules. Now, the crazy thing about this, and look, I'm just going to say this straight up. I don't know anything about Chinese law, guys, but I can tell you what I do know about the Scout situation, which is, I've said this on this show before. Several years ago, before Scout went to LNG, he signed a contract with KT. He signed it, okay? And there was a huge issue with him signing 2 contracts, one with LPL and one with LCK at that time, which meant that he did not end up going to the LCK, but he did sign a fucking contract with KT Rolster. And that is probably part of this entire issue, because what EDG is claiming right now is that basically Scout and his agent have created like this fraudulent atmosphere. And I'm not sure whether it's with LNG, with KT, or with both organizations. But the idea that neither Scout nor his agent nor LNG knew about any of this is absurd, because there was already a court case and they're relitigating it because EDG didn't think that they got enough money. And what has happened is they have frozen the Chinese government has frozen Scout's assets and has issued a travel ban so he does not flee the country, because they're worried that he's just going to peace out, transfer all his money, and just never come back to China in his life, right? So that's why this is happening. So the idea that nobody knew about this, we're never going to get to the bottom of this. And you know what? Riot's not going to get to the bottom of this either, because there's not time to get to the bottom of this. This is obviously extremely complicated. Everybody is incentivized to lie.
Also, notice,
LNG.
Monty, it leans into that thing we've hinted at in the past that no one's allowed to talk about in the LCK or LPL, which is this famous trend that if you go to the LPL and you make too much money, you're sort of not allowed to take it all out the country. That's just something that's a thing, guys.
Yes.
I won't go into it more, but it's one of those things that it's just known. You don't say it out loud. You don't talk about that aspect.
Yes.
It's the hidden secret darkness of LPL, basically.
Which is why, by the way, a lot of
Rookie and Doinby will probably never come back. They'll just be there forever at this point.
A lot of the contracts, especially in the early days that LCK or like Korean players were signing with LPL teams, included the teams purchasing real estate, so buildings or coffee shops, and then transferring those real estate into the players' names as a way of bypassing, getting the money out. So they would actually just the Chinese companies would buy real estate or buy businesses and then transfer those over as part of the payments to the players. So anyway, this is all to get to the point where everybody's incentivized to lie. LNG is incentivized to lie because they want to claim ignorance so that they can get a substitute player or play with Scout. Scout's going to lie and Scout's agency is going to lie because he's the one who's he wants to go to Worlds, obviously. He might even be incentivized to forever escape China, like they are claiming he wants to do, which makes sense. EDG is incentivized to lie because they're trying to keep him there in order to gain more money out of this situation. So the point is, we cannot know what the truth of this is. But what we can know, Thorin, is that some combination of people knew about this. And it is almost unbelievable that neither LNG nor Scout could
I'm going to say right now, Monty, here's why I know it can't be true, because you know this as well. Here's another detail a lot of fans don't understand. In Counter-Strike right now, there was a big scandal. We actually addressed it on the Four Horsemen, where Valve didn't understand how difficult it is for Russians to get visas. And they were like, new rule, you're only allowed to invite people to a tournament 8 weeks before. And it's like, you've just essentially made all the Russians just fail to get their visa there. Like that rule doesn't work. What people don't get is, you might wonder then, how do people go to majors in Counter-Strike? Because, Monty, the second you're even viable to qualify, you just apply for the visa immediately, even if you don't end up going and you don't qualify. So similarly, there's no way, Monty, LNG was like, right, Expedia.com, what flight do you want, Scout? Do you want Windows? Oh, you can't go. What?
Your passport's flagged. Weird.
They knew 100% before they probably even started the regional brawl. What I mean?
And
no way.
the claim,
no
the claim is Scout knew about it, but LNG wasn't told. There's a bunch of these conflicting claims that are going around. So the way it works, and I explained this on previous episodes of SI, is that for every team, but particularly when either it's a Chinese team or all of the teams are going to China, you all have to apply for visas well ahead in advance before you even qualify, which is why, Thorin, they're allowing Yagao to go because Yagao has a visa, clearly, because he would have applied even though, he's not going to Worlds, right? So they needed to select a mid laner that would actually have an approved visa for this tournament to Europe in advance. And what's funny, Thorin, is the rumors, I don't know how substantial these are, is that, like you said, they couldn't pick a top 6 team. But where's the rule? Can somebody please show me the rule where this is if you need an emergency sub, you can't. By the way, guys, I'm pretty sure that rule doesn't exist. That is shit Riot made up.
Isn't it? It's like, wait a minute, we're going to break all our rules and do something you're not allowed to do.
We have a rule for that.
All right, well, in that case, can I have Rookie? Well, no, that's against the rules. What are you saying out loud? It doesn't make sense. I know it's mad, isn't it?
It doesn't make any sense. And also, so the weird thing about JDG, Thorin, is sure, they lost to NIP in the second round of LPL playoffs, but they were still a game away from making the world championship through the regional qualifier. So they set an arbitrary rule, which is why wouldn't it count for regionals? But no, it's only top 6 and summer playoffs. You can't select a player from there. So the rules themselves seem bizarre and arbitrary. Now, presumably Riot or Tencent said this because they didn't want the perception that, Rookie or an equivalent player, losing Scout is going to be horrible for LNG no matter what, because he's the heart of this team, right? There was never going to be an upgrade situation. But
also assumed, by the way, he's the reason why they play that style and the macro style, etc. Of course. He's the player who does that, clearly.
Yeah. Him and Tarzan. I mean, their macro has gotten a lot worse, if we're being honest. But yes. And I just look at this and I think to myself, this is ripe for abuse, because clearly there are a bunch of people lying here, and you need to let the courts solve this. Because if LNG, if Scout didn't tell LNG, then LNG should sue Scout. You know what I mean? That's almost certainly a breach of his contract. Like, he would have had to have notified them about potential other contracts or travel bans that he could have, because that affects their ability to perform at international tournaments, right? So like that just needs to be settled between Scout and LNG. Like, this all needs to be settled outside of the World Championship. And the reality of the situation, Thorin, is like LNG needs to run with the substitutes they have. The rule book that is on lolesports.com says roster lock is August 16th. 2024, and you have to designate your substitutes, and LNG should have to play with a substitute player that they already designated the World Championship, because China is a black box, guys. And the precedent that this sets is that, oh, well, if a team qualifies for Worlds, well, a player can have a mysterious issue as to why they can't travel, which, by the way, could be engineered by the Chinese government. It's a dictatorship, guys. Like, they could be like, well, we're going to make up this reason and the government's going to go along with it. So therefore, we can substitute players and assemble some sort of super team heading into the World Championship. Or maybe this player isn't right for this meta, so we're just going to get this player who's a star on not a top 6 team or whatever random rule Riot decides to put in there. And we're going to bring them along with us, and it's going to give us a better chance at this international event. It is clearly a precedent that could be abused very heavily. And it cannot be allowed under competitive integrity to stand. And you know who is ultimately responsible for this is Chris Greeley, because he is now the head of LoL Esports. So why the fuck isn't he doing anything about this? It's not actually that hard to say, well, you're shit out of luck this year, LNG. If you didn't know about this, sue Scout. This is your problem. This is your problem with Scout. So sue him if you want. But if you did know, get fucked. And if you didn't know, fuck Scout. That's what you should be doing. And that's it. Run with the substitutes you have. Because as far as I can tell, from the Danny situation, from this situation, I don't even understand the point of emergency substitutes. I don't even understand the point.
Because in this case, it's even stupider that there's like that limiting factor of like, but not, by the way, JDG was 6. So I assume they mean top 5. You can't have top 5 is what I assume they mean, because Nip was 5th and JDG was 6th, right? But it's even stupider because actually the rookie example is exactly why this shouldn't be allowed, Monty. What if there is a player, like, by the way, if people don't know, like, I'm sure everyone who watches this show can accept, no matter what they think of what me and you think about the LPL money, they surely respect Kelsey Moore's opinion, right? I believe in spring, Kelsey Moser had rookie as like the second best mid laner in the league, right? So, and he's already one of the best players to ever play League of Legends and a world champion, many time MVP, etc. Right? What if he'd have been, Monty, just on a worse team? What if he'd have been on anyone's legend and come 7th? So you mean I can now...
What if he had just lost one more game to JDG in the playoffs?
And by the way, what if also, in this case, it still would be a downgrade because Scout is like even better and he's the main player in this team. But what people are ignoring is this rule isn't based on Scout being really good. What if this was a team like Yagao in JDG? What if it was JDG couldn't go, Monty, and now I can put rookie on JDG with Ruler and go to Worlds? Because then... Yep. You can argue, like the EG one, you might have made that team better and they might even win Worlds. And by the way, let's just add it to the pile of shit Riot has done in the past. So as well as the EG Danny one, which completely violated competitive integrity, I'm going to bring up my favourite one of all time. Remember when, Monty, they had a LAN tournament? A LAN tournament, bro. RJ45 cables. Not internet. Not a WAN, a LAN. It was called MSI in 2022. And it was held in South Korea. Are you ready, guys? It was won by a team not from South Korea, who didn't go to South Korea, playing over the internet where everyone else had to manually put ping onto their computer to allow a team to remotely play from China and win a LAN in Korea. I still think, sadly, I never did a video. Maybe this will motivate me too. I still think that might be the most mental example of violation of competitive integrity maybe ever. Because what it showed is China is the emperor, fittingly, of League of Legends, and he has your clothes, and we're not allowed to see it. And we're just the guys going, look, he's naked. They're like, no, what are you talking about? That's a beautiful invisible suit he's wearing.
But here's the weird thing, Thorin. Like, with the Danny situation, it's clear that they didn't want to put like a shit game on stage in a stadium that they had sold people tickets for. I don't agree with that. I think competitive integrity trumps that, but that's their reason, okay? MSI, they needed the Chinese team for viewership because otherwise, it's not their fault that the COVID lockdowns happened in China. Nobody was able to actually, that's not true. The reason why it happened was because they weren't able to re-enter the country after leaving.
They wouldn't have been able to play LPL afterwards is the implication.
Yeah, they wouldn't have been able to play LPL. And instead of delaying the LPL games, which by the way, wasn't possible because again, this was how the Asian games fucked everything.
Politics basically ruined all of this. Yeah, there's nothing we could do about it.
It was because they couldn't delay LPL because the Asian games existed, and they couldn't delay LPL into the Asian games time because the Chinese teams needed to play in the Asian games. That's why all this happened, guys. It was actually the Asian games. It's coming back to me now. And so effectively, like because of the quarantine procedures for them going back into China, and they weren't willing to say, well, we're not going to have this tournament without a Chinese team. Like they weren't willing to do that. Okay. That's another thing for viewership that they may have to do. Someone please explain to me how one of 4 Chinese teams who isn't even a favorite for this tournament, having a substitute player and maybe having a disappointing performance is horrible for Worlds. Explain to me that one. What is this some sort of like giant business loss that I'm not getting? Like this is the least impactful of all of these other times that it could have been to have just follow your own fucking rules for once. What is the point of the rule book? What is the point of emergency subs? I don't understand. This is a scenario that needs to be sorted out by EDG, LNG, and Scout. And
by the way, this is even worse because of the Riot circuit, Monty. If this was the major in Counter-Strike, which back in the day was just a qualifier, got you into the major, it wouldn't be as egregious to have a player who's not on your team and not registered for the tournament play. That would be reasonable. The whole point of the league circuit is you only get access to Worlds based on what you did the whole year. So why would you then let a player who wasn't on that team qualify? And as I said, in this case, because it's such an egregious one, he might yet fuck around like DRX and win Worlds for God's sake. Well, how stupid would that be? That would be so fucking stupid. By the way, try to explain that in history. How did you get win on fucking? I didn't know he was on LNG. He never was. No, but he used to be like a sort. No, he just played in that tournament and won it. Like, what can even be? What are we even talking about anymore?
Right,
it's nonsense. By the way, they don't just let in the NFL. Now, by the way, the NFL would be even more incentivized. You can get injured in real life. Imagine in the NFL, my quarterback gets injured, and we're like, oh, Tom Brady's just going to step in. Like, what are you doing? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's also that the rules have just been applied so unevenly. So, for example, when Vietnam couldn't go to international events, was there any accommodation made for them to play from Vietnam? No, of course not.
Remember, Monty, when Upset had to go home because of a family emergency,
Rux and Hillesang?
They had to use that player, Bean, from Formatney Academy, who everyone gaslit you was awesome and should definitely join. By the way, how did this LEC career go again? Anyone still? Oh, you never mentioned his name again. Exactly. So imagine if instead, when Upset went out, they could have just gone back and picked, because let me think, that was the year, Monty, where G2 didn't go. Imagine if they'd just gone, oh, hey, Reckless is playing. Oh, by the way, Fnatic's bringing Reckless from G2. He's just going to play at Worlds now. Would that have been fair? It would be insanely in violation of... But you're right. Essentially, the minnows, I mean, in the context of the LCS, EG was a shark, weren't they? But in the international scene, they always just pivot to the larger force. If you're China, you get everything. If you're in the LCS, EG gets everything. Like that's the worst part. You're not only violating your own rules, you're doing it capriciously to benefit your partners. And the little guy gets fucked. Because the VCS one is the most egregious one ever. Dude, they couldn't attend international tournaments for like the majority of 2 years or something, man. And then later you were like, actually, China can just stay at home though, can't they? That'd be rude not to let them play.
And exactly the same reason too, because of COVID. Exactly the same reason. But also, I mean, there were other things like, I mean, Fnatic obviously has done a bunch of shenanigans over the years with like emergency substitute. Remember Wonder also? I mean,
sure.
Again, I keep asking myself, what is the purpose of emergency substitutes if at the end of the day you can just sign any uncontracted player that you want that isn't on your roster? Like, what is a roster lock? What the fuck is a roster lock? Somebody fucking tell me what a roster lock is, because it has no meaning in any of these contexts with Riot. And everything is an emergency. Everything is an emergency. Like, I don't understand how this issue that has been brewing for months and months and months, because there are claims from EDG that Scout knew this after spring split, that he couldn't, that the travel ban was there. So like, how is this an emergency?
Right, here's my obvious joke. Being as Monty, the SoftBank Hawks already have a whole bunch of Koreans. They should just tell Dasher, unfortunately, you're about to have problems preventing you attending the event. Welcome, BDD. You're now playing in the SoftBank Hawks. Like, why not? He's not going to be at Worlds. Let's bring him in. If we're violating the rules, let everyone violate the rules. Go for it. So let's all make super
Everybody
teams.
has a super
Koreans.
team. Yeah.
Let's just do it. Let's make it all. You know, Ruler. I tell you what, Monty. I'm starting to feel like maybe, you know what? Maybe Goomer's not playing that well at the moment. Hey, Ruler, you want to come to T1 and fuck around and win Worlds, mate?
Hey, Yun, you want to get replaced by Ruler?
I know, it's mental in it. It's so mental in it. In fact, logically, TL, remember, TL is a Korean team, Monty. They should just kick APA and Yon and sign Rookie and Ruler and just fucking win Worlds. By the way, with those carries and their macro, they might actually win Worlds, by the way. That's how stupid this rule is. Also, who the fuck wouldn't want to watch that? That would be straight fire. I can't lie. That would be fucking mega, mate.
Right. But I just find it so interesting that the fans' reaction to this is like, oh, well, now we get to watch Yagao. Why can't I watch Rookie with LNG? It's like, what is the point of Worlds qualification if we can just mix and match teams going into international events? What's the point of the rules? What's the point of roster locks? What's the point of competitive integrity? Like, that shouldn't be the takeaway here. The takeaway should be, how the fuck can teams change their rosters a month after roster lock for an issue that must have been known to at least some of the parties involved for months and months and months and months and months? Like, this isn't an emergency. It's categorically not an emergency. What? And there's just no time to get to the bottom of it. So Riot's probably like, well, we don't have, they're not going to send fucking investigators to China or like hire a Chinese law firm to deal with this. Partially because I don't think they can, because Tencent would probably not even allow them to do that. Because Tencent doesn't want Riot HQ, digging around in China. God knows what they find. They might find out Shear's real age accidentally. But like this whole thing is just fucking ridiculous.
By the way, someone please take the classic poster for the film from the 80s with Tom Hanks, Big, where it's him with that like fucking machine that he goes and plays like the great whatever it was called. Make that, but it's shit, and it's like Big, because the joke is I want to be a real grown up playing the LPL and everything. Like, step right up, sure. It's like it's the same plot in it. It's fucking ridiculous, mate.
Outrageous.
Also, the other joke is, what if instead, you know what, at this point, LNG, almost to flaunt how shit these rules are, should actually just fuck with them, Monty. Like, they should bring the Shy and have him play mid lane. Why not? Who's going to stop you? You can do whatever you want now, mate. It's madness.
He's the wonder of this year, just the uncontracted player who just rocks up at Worlds. I just don't understand that. I don't understand like who is making these decisions, why we write rule books in the first place, why nobody. Maybe I'm just the boomer yelling at clouds. I care about this stuff because I care about the history of the esport and the competitive integrity. But the fans don't seem to care, which is wild, because I guarantee you in any traditional sport, if this was happening, if a team went to playoffs, people would lose their fucking minds. People lose their fucking minds if a team that didn't get into the NBA playoffs suddenly had a new starting center. Like, what? And by the way, that would be after the trade deadline, guys, which is effectively what they're doing. They're loaning players after a roster lock deadline, which is a trade deadline. And they're just allowing them to compete in the biggest tournament in the world. And that's fine, apparently.
It's mental, though. That's why low key. That's why actually the saddest thing is that it's Yagao and it won't matter. If it actually had been Rookie and they'd have won Worlds, it would have again just been like that, like the one where RNG won remotely. It would have been such egg on Riot's face. Like, it's so bad. Especially because the worst thing is, this is what sucks so much, Monty. This is the same Riot Games that when it comes to solo queue are the ridiculous hall monitor stickler for rules, like banning Dom from core streams because he said he'll be polished your nails or whatever. Like, but then when it comes to actual real things like what players can play in the World Championship, they're just loosey goosey in the rules or whatever. Like, it's bollocks, mate. Like, doesn't even make sense.
I mean, they made up rules and said I violated them as well as an excuse to like kick me out of the LCS. Like they basically made up new rules and then proactively applied them to me after they were made up. So like we know that when it's convenient for them, they will apply their rules, even rules that didn't exist at the time, or they'll lie about it. But when it actually comes to it being very easy, them writing a fucking rule book, putting it out publicly, they won't enforce the rules that are in there. And I agree with you, Thorin. Like, what's so egregious to me is the teams should be outraged about this. Like, especially because World's performance could really matter. Like, if I'm a North American or European team, and there could be a massive financial difference for my team in terms of sponsorships if I make it out of Swiss stage or not. Like, if I make quarters, it could mean hundreds of thousands of dollars for me in new sponsors. So I would be pretty pissed if this situation wasn't being enforced the way it should be. And like, why am I getting penalized because these teams have all this drama? And again, in no way is Yagao an upgrade, guys. If we're literally just talking about Yagao's individual performance, it has been quite bad. But the meta is probably better at Worlds for Yagao as a player. I still don't think he's going to be great, and it is an obvious downgrade. But the concern is that this does make things much more abusable in the future. And as we know, when things can get abused, they do get abused because there's money and fame on the line. So you just can't allow it to happen, which is the purpose of having these rules in the first place. So I don't get it. I don't get it at all. And I don't get why the teams are not saying, well, you just have to use your fucking subs that you brought, just like all of us submitted our rosters, and we would have to use those subs, and just like we're shit out of luck, and that's just how it is. That makes sense to me. And I think that it's a pretty big. This is why you do not want Riot as a tournament operator, is because they can't make the shitty decisions like this. Like, it's not good for them to like have this scenario, but you just have to, for the sake of the competitive integrity and the fans' belief in you as a sport, you have to take this seriously. And this also just goes to show that Riot is running a marketing exercise and they're not running a sport, because if you care about competition, this can't be allowed to happen. So pretty garbage.
What's great is that one combined it all, though. It was, we were complaining about Riot, rule violations, and conflict of interest. And competitive integrity, sorry, which are like, we almost filled the whole bingo card on one topic.
I mean, it all just plays into itself, right? And, you know, there's also a possibility that Tencent is actually just strong-arming Riot on this, and maybe Riot disagrees, but the Chinese overlords are saying, no, you can't do this. So
it's even an area where it's obvious, right? This is where Riot, also being owned by Tencent, who have an obvious like control exerted on them by the Chinese government, is a negative as well, Monty. Remember, Riot could just go, well, we don't care about any issue in China. We're an international company. We're Riot Global for America. But instead, because it's Chinese law, well, obviously that is God to fucking Tencent, isn't it? So they're not going to do shit about that. They have to prioritize it. They'll probably get shut down otherwise, mate.
Yep. Well, Thorin, we are going to be doing our Worlds preview episode at some point very soon. So I think we should probably switch to viewer questions, and then we will get another episode in before play-in starts, guys. Yeah. So you have a chance to hear about some of the teams and their performance, but obviously a lot to get to this week on a variety of topics like the JoJo and LCS sales and everything like that. Plus, we will have that 4 Horsemen coming up for you guys too about the LCS team sales in more depth and hear from a guest. So we'll take a quick.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.